Hi, my name is Joe, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I discuss martial arts books by doing martial arts book reviews. I also touch on some other martial arts related subjects. Today I'm going to be reviewing Winning Karate by Joseph Jennings. Now, when I started looking into the background of this book, one of the things that popped out at me was that Mr. Jennings was the founder of Panther Productions. And for those of us that grew up in the 80s and 90s, reading all the martial arts magazines back then, Panther Productions was certainly one of the first, if not the first, major martial arts instructional video producer. And they produced everything, I think I've seen stuff from them on various karate styles, various kung fu styles. I think they were the first to do like mixed martial arts videos with like Kimo Leopoldo and Mark Kerr, and I think maybe Boss Rutan, and JKD stuff with Paul Vunak and Dan Inosanto and a few others. So, they were the people you went to if you wanted martial arts instructional videos back in the day. So, pertinent to the topic that we're covering right now, Mr. Jennings has a background in Isshinryu Karate. And even though the book Winning Karate is generally meant to be a primer for karate in general, one thing we get a lot with him is the sort of Isshinryu movements. And instead of, the more classical, the longer stances, the, reverse punches, what we get with Isshinryu is using this fist with thumb on top as opposed to folded over, and they go vertical. And, that's what makes it stand out from all the other karate styles. So while a lot of the principles that are covered in this book can apply to all karate styles, a lot of the techniques are going to be specific to Isshinryu. One thing that stands out about this particular book is that there's an emphasis on the physical fitness side of karate, meaning that, among other things, we start with like warm-ups and stretching. That's one of the first chapters. And then as Mr. Jennings gets into the basics, including basic blocks, basic kicks, basic punches, those chapters are accompanied by, at the end of them, sections on various exercises, including weight training exercises, which wasn't that common back then, still isn't now, to be honest. And that's something I really appreciate about this text. He's like, in order to win at karate, because we're doing winning karate, you're going to need to be physically fit, in order to excel in competition. When he covers the fundamentals, I like the fact that he doesn't belabor using Japanese terminology. Again, it's meant to be more of an overview. So I think that works well with this particular text. I think a highlight of this book is he's got a long section on combinations for competition. And he classifies them into offensive combinations and defensive combinations. And when he says defensive, what that means is counters. You're defending against the opponent's strike and then throwing a series of your own. I like the emphasis on combinations here as well, because I think that they work as well for a more full contact environment as they do for a point sparring environment. It's less about, touch and go as, the guy's coming at me, I'm going to touch him 5 times. The difference between light contact and full contact in that instance is, if you're just going to tap the guy or blast right through him, but the use of combinations as a principle is still very beneficial for both environments. There are a few things that get shown in the combination sections that aren't covered in the fundamental sections. One of those that stands out to me is it's what I initially heard referred to as a dragon tail sweep. So he's dropping low to the ground and then basically doing a spinning wheel kick at the guy's ankles. One thing that sort of dates this book, because it was written in 1982, is that, to my understanding, that particular maneuver is illegal in point sparring competitions these days. But that particular technique was also not demonstrated on its own before it was shown in the context of a sparring match. And I think that that's a bit of a drawback of the book, that we're shown people doing stuff that hasn't been covered previously as far as like the finer points of actually executing them. The book also includes a self-defense section, and as with many self-defense chapters in books from this era or even today, it sort of runs hot and cold. I like the full Nelson defense, for instance. It's one, I don't know whether I originally learned it from this book or, I previously reviewed Lessons from the Samurai. They both start off similarly when it comes to the defense for a full Nelson, and I will use that to this day. When I have taught people defenses against a full Nelson, that's what I go for. So that's a solid defense. I know because I've used it. And then he's got other things like, this young woman who's throwing a kick at head level while wearing these 2 or 3 inch heels. And I think that looks really good in a photograph. I will provide my audience with a link to a video by YouTube creator Jill Bearup, who covers stage combat and the practicality, or lack thereof, in fighting in women's clothing. She has a video on fighting in different types of shoes and an entire section on why you don't want to wear heels. Another funny thing about this section, again, the book came out in 1982. It was very clearly the end of the 70s, transitioning into the 80s, because everybody's got these gigantic heels. You see bell bottoms, you see like the larger collars on the shirts. Thought that was kind of amusing. And then you also get, interestingly, defense against a rifle held to your head when you're in a sitting position. I do wonder if that was created in response to some of the hijackings that were going on around this time, and we're getting some attention, because it's hard for me to imagine a situation where you would be sitting down and a guy comes up and holds what looks like a Tommy gun up to your head. As with all defenses against firearms, it's always a risk. I can't really judge it. I guess having a defense is better than having no defense. But are you faster than a speeding bullet? Because I'm not. But I thought that was an interesting inclusion for this particular text. Toward the end of the book, we get chapters on actually preparing for competition, and Mr. Jennings divides the book into preparing for sparring competition and preparing for kata competition. And again, there's the emphasis on fitness that runs through this whole text, because both programs start out more or less the same way. You stretch for, I think, 10 minutes, and then you go for a run, and then you do like 75 jump squats and 100 push-ups and 150 sit-ups, and you do this every day, because of course you would. So again, I do appreciate the emphasis on fitness when it comes to this book. Now, going into the pros and cons, the pros, again, I really like the combinations. You know, I think they would be worth practicing even if you participate in a full contact environment. If you do American style point karate, or I think ITF Taekwondo, they use similar rules as far as I'm aware. So it might be worth looking into this for some different ideas on combinations. And again, if you practice full contact, wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at it either. I do, again, like the emphasis on fitness. You can get good workout ideas for it. And as an intro into karate, I think it does a very good job. As for the cons, again, the self-defense stuff is hot and cold. There are some things that I know work well. There are some things that could reasonably be assumed to work well. And then there are other things that I wouldn't recommend at all. As I mentioned before, a lot of the actual karate techniques are more individualized toward the Isshinryu style specifically. So if you were using this as an introduction into, karate or karate type martial arts like Taekwondo or Tang Soo Do, you might find that the basics you've been practicing will not transfer as well into class once you get there. Unless, of course, you find an Isshinryu school. And some of the elements of fitness are a little outdated. The things that stand out the most, you show both lateral pull downs as well as overhead press starting from behind the neck. And my understanding is that we just don't do that anymore because that puts too much strain on the shoulders. So if you were to look at some of those fitness routines as a raw beginner, some of them might actually do more harm than good. But, given that we've got almost 4 years of fitness knowledge afterwards, and you can go find like good personal trainers, good instructional videos on YouTube, good books, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But if you are not used to weightlifting routines, I would say maybe don't use this book as your primary source for weightlifting information. So who would I recommend this to? Again, as I said, if you're starting to get into karate, this might be a good idea of how to get into it. If you want a pretty cool list of combinations and you practice either American style point sparring or a full contact sparring format, this might give you some interesting ideas for that. So to be honest, I'm not sure if it's still in print. I know that I bought it in the past 15 or 20 years. So they were still printing it after the year 2000 for sure. But you might have difficulty getting your hands on it these days. Anyway, that's all I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed my review, and please like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.